Watershed, talking Vietnamese art and culture. This event is part of the Vietnam Festival of Creativity and Design 2020, and it also accompanies the exhibition No Rain Without Clouds, which is where we are right now. Both the talk and the exhibition have been organized by Dr. Emma Duster and Ms. Michelle T from RMIT Vietnam. And I'd like to say thanks to them also for inviting me to be the moderator for the talk today. This talk won't be in English, and it's also being live streamed right now, so we can all watch it later as well through the festival Facebook page. So for this talk, our brief is to look back at the year 2020 and to take stock of everything that's been happening. A wide ride, to say the least. And obviously, a lot has been said about everything that's been happening this year, but I find that it's always useful for us to, to consider the context around us and to really think about the impact that it's going to have on our present times and also the possibility of going ahead and, all the things that will be happening soon in the future. So with that in mind, I'd like to introduce our speakers today. On my far end, we have artist Richard Chen. He's an artist, lecturer, and writer who's living in Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam. And since returning to the country in 2003, he's been very instrumental in a lot of different projects in the contemporary art scene in Vietnam. To mention a few, we have Project One, one of the first performance groups in Vietnam. We also have Dear Projects, and we also have Mugat Station. And next to Rich, we have Nguyễn Thế Sơn, who's a visual artist, curator, and also a lecturer at the Hanoi University of Fine Art. Sơn usually works a lot with a range of organizations from various fields, and some common threads throughout these projects include the empowerment for the youth and the disadvantaged, and also the incorporation of contemporary art into public spaces. And he's been leading a number of projects in recent years that explore these topics, include the Phuc Tân Public Art Complex, the Phùng Hưng Street Art Project, and also the contemporary art exhibition underneath the National Assembly building in Hanoi. And next to me, we have Dr. Emma Duster, who's a lecturer in communication studies at RMIT Vietnam. Her research interests include the creative industries, the art and cultural sector, and digital technologies and transnational communication. At the moment, she's also been leading a project to explore the digitization of the art and cultural sector in Hanoi, in Vietnam, and the relationship between that and the preservation and promotion of Vietnamese art and culture. And I'm looking forward to hearing from her about that research in a minute. In terms of the outline for our talk, we're going to start with 3 short presentations from our speakers, which are going to be 5 minutes each. And then later we're going to have 30 minutes for the panel discussion, and then about 15 and 20 minutes for any questions that the audience here might have. And without further ado, I'd like to start by inviting Nguyễn Thế Sơn to introduce about his practice and the projects that he's been working on right now.
Hello. Right now I'm teaching in Vietnam Fine Art University in the painting department. And the 2 major I'm concentrate on working with my student in fine art photography and experimental art, especially using traditional material like seal painting and lacquer painting. And right now I have an exhibition for my student. Wrote a project connect traditional fox painting of Vietnam is Hàng Chống painting in 75 Hàng Chống Street. Is a Đình Nam Hương, it's Nam Hương communal house with the traditional materials of fine art in Vietnam. It is still painting and lacquer painting. And right now you can see a project from tradition to tradition right in the center of Hoan Kiem Lake. And you can see the public art project I did recently is the Phúc Thân Public Art in the riverbank of the Red River. And it's have a very special effect in the night from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. when the light system is turning on. And maybe almost you are here and know about the public art project in Phùng Hưng. Yeah, and I made one contemporary art project, contemporary art space for National Assembly, cover 1,500 square meter, and I invite around 15 artists from Hanoi, Huế, Saigon, and even some Việt Kiều artists. Yeah, and it is some recently my project. And beside of it, I carry out a residency program in America, in Worcester Art Museum, and last year I made a project in Europe, in the Netherlands. Yeah, so yeah, kind of my public space, a public art project. The project I did for my student as a lecturer, professor there, and my personal project also. So you can see more if you're interested in nguyenthesern.com. Yeah. Bye.
Thank you, Sơn. I'd like to add that the exhibition that he mentioned, that he's realized with the students, is currently on right now. It's called From Tradition to Tradition, and the address is number 75 Hàng Trong, which is not far from here. So
just 5 minutes walking. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, I'd like to invite Richard to introduce about your work.
Hello, my name is Richard Streetmatter Jun. I'm an artist based in Saigon since 2003. Before that, I was living in America where I went to art school. At that time, I was focusing more on performance and art and technology. But over the years, I've moved away from immaterial practices and concentrated on using materials, mostly through sculpture and painting. So you'll see some of the images in the background cycling through as I speak. I've always had one foot in practice and one foot in education. I was lecturing also at RMIT for 9 years. I'm currently a lecturer at Đại học Hoa Sen in Saigon. And currently, I'll be preparing for an exhibition in Saigon at the factory in March, focusing on sculptural practices. I think that I'm very interested to see how art continues to develop in Vietnam and in the region. And so I'm very happy to be here at the Women's Museum to see this exhibition come together, where many of these pieces were in various locations, but seeing them in one place, I think it really gives a powerful impact on very different artists from very, very different locations, but the curators have done a great job in finding several themes, connecting these works. So it's even though I was part of the original curatorial team, the experience is really fresh for me. You can also find more about me through dearcritic.com, but without further ado, I'd like to pass the mic.
Thank you, Richard. So obviously, as he mentioned, he used to be a lecturer at RMIT Vietnam, and he was also very instrumental in helping to develop the RMIT art collection. And obviously, all these works are from that collection, and I suppose we're going to hear about that during the talk as well. Thank you. And next, we have Dr. Emma Tester.
Okay, hi everyone. I'm Emma Juster, originally from the UK. I've been lecturing in the UK for about 6 years, mostly in media and communications, but I've always researched alongside my lecturing in terms of art and culture and the art and culture sector. So I've researched about how artists travel across Europe in terms of their mobilities, migrations, and transnational communications. And then I came to Vietnam and arrived in Hanoi about a year ago and realized actually I wanted to carry on this research into art and culture and cultural professionals, including visual artists, in terms of how they're harnessing digital technology to really interact and internationalize their practice and to showcase their art internationally. And I think that's really been starting to happen. Mostly with artists, but also now with museums like the Women's Museum, who are even starting to use YouTube in order to engage a younger audience in what they're doing. So that's what I'm doing at the moment, and I now have a research team, and we've got a research project that's taking place up until December next year. And that's looking into how art and cultural spaces in Hanoi are using digital platforms to engage their audiences, and also how they are digitizing their art and culture collections, and the kind of opportunities as well as the challenges that cultural organizations and museums are facing right now. So that's the research I'm doing. And then I'm also a lecturer at RMIT, and I've been lecturing there for about 1 year or so. So yeah, so we'll see how the research develops. And as part of the research, we have the festival where this week we've put on a series of events, and this exhibition is one of those events. It's on until tomorrow. And this comes alongside a virtual exhibition that we curated, and you can see that on one of the slides behind you. And we've also organized conferences and seminars as well as this talk. And I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank Son and Richard and Hung for making this possible. Yeah, but with that, I want to pass the mic back to Hung. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Emma. I suppose I'd like to start by exploring the current context a little bit. And obviously, when we mention the context of 2020, it's impossible to avoid talking about the impact of the pandemic that has been going on and impacting pretty much everyone else on this planet. So I'd like to ask all of you if you have noticed any sizable impact of the pandemic on, first of all, like everything that's happening around you in the arts and culture scene, and secondly, in terms of your personal practice, whether there's been any sizable impact. Maybe I'd like to ask Son first.
Yeah, actually, for my personal experience, I have influence directly from the impact of the pandemic, especially with my exchange project with Netherlands, the Minerva Academy University, and Royal Academy of Art. So I have to cancel 2 projects. To exchange program and education with the student, so it's really really direct influence, and we have to postpone this to next year, and I don't know what is going on. It is the first one, and the second one is as you can see, the public art project in Phuc Tân is really we got a problem in financial with that project. From the beginning, we start the project before Tết holiday, when all the how can I say, the hotel and the company in the Hoan Kiem district they are really promise, okay, they will support for the project. But when we start from before Tết, and we finish very soon, right after Tết, and suddenly the pandemic came, And the financial, we really got a problem with the financial. Until now, we just got 40% of the project. And even the project is really now quite a success and gives a benefit for the community or even the city. But it is the artist, actually the artist really got the influence from the project already. And the other side, for example, I'm going to make a project in the summer already, but soon, in the end of this year, with a photo showcase. It is nearly the first step of the photo triennales in Bandung, Indonesia. Now I cannot come also. I have to use a virtual version. So I think a lot of influence directly with my teaching and even my art project, my personal and even the public art project. Still, a lot of influence.
Richard, do you want to?
Well, I think it's been very difficult, obviously. I guess to start more about how it's impacted the local scene. Of course, many of the galleries and many of the events have been postponed. There's some, maybe not direct connections, but it changes everybody's lives. And it's very difficult. During the pandemic, we also lost a young emerging artist in Saigon. It was very sad. So I'm still trying to find my own feelings towards how this pandemic has affected me personally. On one hand, in January, I had my exhibition in Hong Kong, and then everything else from 2020 had been canceled. So which was very hard for me. On the other hand, I had the birth of my child, which was very happy, but a lot of uncertainty. So I don't really know if I have a concrete response because I'm still kind of riding that wave at the moment. I'm hopeful that we as humanity will find a reasonable way together to get through this, especially in light of many countries not taking this seriously. I can be very pleased to say that I was in Vietnam during the pandemic, where we have collectively done one of the better jobs in preventing the spread of this virus. As far as moving forward from the end of 2020 into 2021, I feel that most people are optimistic. We see people posting events that are coming with the intention of seeing them delivered. So I guess that's really what I have to say at the moment.
And Emma?
So in terms of my research, which we started at the start of this year, before lockdown, we realized that actually when we knew we were going to go into lockdown, a lot of art and culture spaces in Hanoi had a meeting to say, well, what are we going to do? What's our strategy going to be during lockdown when our spaces, our physical, spaces are not open? What are we going to do? And so there was a strategy that was, created by art and culture organizations on what to do. And so a lot of events, I know a lot of events have been cancelled and postponed, but there was a very sort of marked adaptation where a lot of events were adapted and went online. And a lot of spaces and museums have really taken time during lockdown to think about and to consider how can we work online and to actually realize the potential of digital spaces in terms of reaching a much broader audience, not only a younger audience, but also an international audience. And to also spend this time firstly during lockdown, but it's still happening now in terms of, you know, how we can utilize various different platforms. So not only Facebook, but also YouTube and Instagram, to bring their space or their museum to their audience. And so I've actually seen a kind of positive response to lockdown and the time that people had in order to think about their work and how to adapt their work to this current situation. And a lot of people in interview have said that they would take this into the future. And so this will be a long-term project and initiative to actually have more kind of hybrid models of work. So even when we go back into the physical exhibitions and workshops and events, there's still going to be, like there is today, this kind of hybrid of offline and online. Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so despite of a lot of difficulties in the impact from the pandemic, I want to tell another side, of the story. That's mean even we got a lot of influence from the financial or cancer or a lot of influence to our project. But thinking again, I feel in 2020s, I and my college in my team did a lot of projects. They still finish and challenge. I think it's most important. Even we make opening online about the public art project on the Zoom. Yeah. So even we can talk with a lot of my friends and a lot of audience all over the world through Zoom. And even we have art talk online. And even I'm thinking about I still made a quite interesting project. Interact with one nhà mặt phố is a VUV house, and we make a project we call a bridging tube ống thở. Yeah, so it is a kind of site-specific project, and I think it's quite good one also. And even right now, I'm collaboration with Liên Trương, the artist in North Carolina, in the painting department, university. And we make an exchange project with 10 students from North Carolina University and 10 students from my studio. And we made an exchange project with the subject about portrait. And we make online. And next month we will have an offline exhibition. So I think we always trying to alternate between online and offline mode. And I think even have a lot of problem, but I think we try to challenge and pass the and even one more example about the project. When I ran right now, I make a collaboration with Wing Hotel. It is a branch of Indochina company, and they make a collaboration with me with a personal project to promote for one brand new branch of hotel in Vietnam. It's a Wing. So I think even this year is quite a lot of bad thing happen, but I by myself and my team still got quite a lot of activity and quite good results. Yeah, just another sign of a story about the impact from the pandemic. Yeah, I want to share.
Yeah, I think indeed, even though the downtime obviously is, even though it kind of prevents us from doing a lot of things, I think it also gave us a chance to really kind of sit back and take some distance from what we were doing before, and to take stock of the situation and figure out the next steps. So obviously Sun mentioned that he's working on some projects online right now, and obviously it kind of allows for that sort of interaction between people who are based in different countries right now. But I'd like to ask whether there are still any challenges to this sort of mode of working. Challenges, whether.
Actually, you want to ask about the that project?
Yeah, and other projects that you're doing online at the moment?
Online, actually, I have to teach online all the time, nearly half a year in my university, Vietnam Fine Art University, nearly half a year, nearly the last school year. I have to finish all the course for the student online, and we only have nearly the last month, and even we have to extend the school year for 2 months. Not normally the school year we stop in June, but even we have to stop the school year of last year in August. Yeah, and September it is start the new year. So almost we have no holiday in summer. Yeah, so I think for me as a teacher, a lecturer in the school, we still have to challenge with the teaching. Yeah, and even I by myself still wrote some more project for the student, and one of the workshop that you can see the results right now in Đình Nam Hương in 75. Actually, we just carry out still in the pandemic time, and we work a lot online. Yeah, so right now I think we change the habit of working not only offline like before. I think because of the influence when we forced to work with online mode. So even right now, even when we have our condition to work totally offline, we're still mixing with online mode. So I think the effect and the result of the project even better than if you only work with the traditional way in offline mode.
Right, thank you. And I'd like to ask Emma, because obviously this exhibition is a very good example of combining between virtual and physical platforms. And so I'd like to ask about your experience in putting together this exhibition on both of the platforms, and whether you think the virtual platform could replace the physical platform entirely in the future.
Yes, thank you. Yes, good question. And we actually started with the virtual exhibition. So we started almost with the digital and then went physical, secondary. So yeah, we used a platform to create the virtual exhibition. It was pretty straightforward actually, and we uploaded all the artworks that we'd selected for our theme, for preserving, in terms of preserving art and culture in Vietnam. So that was kind of our theme for the virtual exhibition, and then we really wanted to see that in the physical space, but there to be some dialogue between the virtual and the physical space, so that they weren't entirely different, that there was some similarity. So you can see some of the colors of the walls in the exhibition here in the physical space are the same, or we try to get it very similar to the virtual exhibition and the colors there. Of course, the artworks are all the same, and we tried to make the kind of the positioning of the artworks similar, and the three kind of main themes of everyday objects, spaces and places are sort of similar to the virtual space as well. So they really can speak to each other. And I think that way, with the hybrid model, I think it really enhances both spaces, because once you go home from the physical exhibition, you can go back again to the exhibition virtually, or the other way around. You can go virtually to the exhibition and then think, yes, I'm going to go to the physical space and see how it feels when you're in the physical space and how it feels different. For instance, the virtual exhibition that we created also has a soundtrack by a sound artist who's a lecturer down in Ho Chi Minh City, who did the sound for us. And that really gives it, the virtual exhibition, another dimension. And I think this is in line with what's happening at the moment, where virtual spaces are not an add-on anymore. They're actually their own space in themselves. But I would also say that they're not a replacement for the physical space. And we must remember that, in a time after this pandemic, we are going to go back to the physical spaces. And so we also don't want these virtual spaces to be too good, because no one will then actually go to the physical spaces. So we must get that balance right now and in the future. Yeah.
Thank you. And a question for Rich. So I find it quite interesting that you sort of move from the immaterial to the material, and from the sort of performance and new media art practices that you were doing before to now making sculptures and paintings and doing things more in the sort of physical world, basically, essentially. So I'd like to hear about your opinion on the kind of the virtual technologies that are kind of being used a lot right now, and whether that's something that you...
Well, on the user end, I've subscribed to new services where I can learn new skills. And some of them, like if I wanted to learn 3D modeling or things like that, it's very good for virtual spaces. But the smell of burning wood, the wetness of clay, these tangible things can never be replicated online. And as a practitioner, you need to know by touching the paper whether it's dry enough for the next layer of watercolor, or is it going to bleed? Is it going to granulate? These things you can watch on video, but unless you're actually doing them or being next to somebody that's guiding you, I think it's a little underwhelming. But I think my whole practice has been kind of moving along by disappointments and then breakthroughs, and disappointments and breakthroughs. How I actually came to return to materials is I wasn't really good at digital things. I was actually told by a professor that you could consider other things. You're a great kid, but this might not be your aptitude. And as heartbreaking as that was, and I had a very extreme reaction to it. I just moved completely away from digital and the screen, and I said, I don't have anything. I'm a third-year student. I'm about to graduate, and my idol had told me that this isn't really your thing. And so what did I do? I said, I have nothing except me and my body, and so why not use that? And then I found out, oh, I'm pretty good at that. And that's how it kind of moved along, and I came to Vietnam with just me and my body and the bodies of other people to create performance works. But I found that I've always been a conceptual artist, kind of using discourse and thinking, but I was never good with my hands, and I always loved to see people work with their hands. And so, in fact, at RMIT, we introduced a drawing course, and I was tasked for delivering it, knowing deeply inside I was terrible at drawing. And so I forced myself to, over 2 years, to learn again, and then introduce the course, and I fell in love with drawing, which is, for me, the foundation of taking an idea and putting it into some form. And so I went completely to materials, but now I've been hired as a new digital art program is being introduced at a university in Saigon. So I'm kind of like jumping back and forth. But that's life, and that's how we're also going to get through this pandemic. Through the bad times, the good times, the digital, and the real.
Thank you. I'd like to ask Emma. So obviously with the exhibition that's happening online right now, and also a lot of these virtual exhibitions happening, not only Vietnam, but also in other places around the world. But especially in Vietnam, I'd like to ask whether that might, these online exhibitions might have any impact on the issue. Whether these online exhibitions might have any impact on the issue of censorship, and whether you have had any experience with that in putting together this exhibition.
So yes, thank you. So I mean, as part of the research, many of our interviewees did say that, whilst the, online allows them more freedom to upload kind of more sort of artworks with different kinds of subject matter. The other issue is obviously copyright. And the online platform means that, you know, it goes freely, publicly accessible. And the copyright here in Vietnam is, you know, needs to be developed alongside the developments in digitization. So really what we're seeing is, you know, a lot of development in digitization, but not the copyright laws and policy to keep up with that that transition and that development in digitization. So that really, the copyright is lagging behind, not only here, but all across the world. You know, because we're wanting to make art exhibitions and artworks publicly accessible. So we need to have that proper copyright in place. So that's an issue and a challenge that we've noticed in this research. And yes, similarly, of course, with this exhibition, we also had challenges, you know, especially with the physical exhibition of some artworks not being allowed because of these laws. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there might have been 2 or 3 works that were initially planned for this, but didn't appear in the end. So yeah, so it's very, but the works are still up on the virtual exhibition, or they're not on there either? Right. Okay. And Son and Richard, do you have any experience with that? The 2 issues, the copyrights and censorship, when we go on to the online platforms.
I think for me, I have some experience in the censorship, like a personal experience, especially with the project in Phùng Hưng. Actually, until now, the project in Phùng Hưng, the public art in Phùng Hưng, until now, even is over 4 years. It's finished nearly the timeline of the project. Even right now, it still not have permission. Yeah. So I mean, the censorship in Vietnam, especially with something public, is quite strict. It's quite strict, and even because of censorship judgment, they're still thinking about the way, like a one-way art kind of propaganda thing, and they are quite not really friendly with something can interact, and calling people can interact in the works, especially with the work can have installation or something like recalling they interact in the memory or something, and I can understand it. But for me, especially in this time, in the pandemic time, I remember some project recently like Breathing Tube, ống thở, or even right now with the exhibition in the Đình Nam Hương. Even I don't ask, I just made it. So even I think maybe when we try to make something good, and even we don't really need to thinking about the censorship, because yeah, even I just waiting, so who can come and stop the exhibition, and no one comes. So really, we make 2 exhibitions, and at least only 1 month, 1 exhibition, and ống thở, Breathing Tube for 1 month, and this exhibition for 2 months, nobody comes. So I don't think it's really a problem when we try to make a good thing for community. And even the project in public art in Phúc Tân, even the same censorship team, like in Phùng Hưng project before, for 10 person, and even when they give the judgment for public art in Phúc Tân, nearly 100% is passed. So I don't know. Maybe maybe the situation in the art scene in Vietnam, or even now Vietnam is applying to the system of the creative city or something, and it makes things changing. I don't know exactly, but as a practitioner, as an art practitioner, or even like on art lectures, I'm always trying to make the good thing for community, and I'm not really thinking about the censorship or not. Yeah, so it's just my personal experience. Yeah.
Thank you. And Richard, do you have any
Thanks,
experience
Son.
with that?
I think that's the right way to approach it. Because the censorship is really external to your practice. Of course, it has an effect, but you don't have any control over that. And it's always tough to ask artists or people involved in culture to comment on censorship, even though it exists globally in different ways. So Vietnam is not unique in any respect to that. Most all contemporary artists have dealt with this issue firsthand. For 6 years, I didn't show in Vietnam until I had a show in Hanoi. And it seemed like the cloud had been lifted. I have no experience really in the copyright, the second part, but I would just like to echo what Sun said, that you should try to make the best work that you can. And you might even find yourself censored, but you may find yourself celebrated as well by the censors later. You see this all the time in the film industry, for example, where films in Vietnam are banned, win international accolades, and then are showing in major theaters here. Do the best work you can. Trust yourself. Do not be afraid. Use your best judgment, and you will define your own practice in your career. And that's what I would recommend that everybody do. Students, artists, educators.
Yeah, I think it's quite a good advice, and especially to give to the people who are just sort of starting, the students, for instance. And I find it quite interesting that all three speakers who are here today are currently teaching in different sort of educational contexts in Vietnam. And I like to ask about the sort of current picture of art education in your experience. Maybe Emma, do you want to talk about the RMIT context?
Sure. So from an RMIT perspective, and also across, more educational institutions, there really isn't enough resources in terms of art and culture generally from Vietnam. So what we find in our educational practice is that we almost have to use resources from elsewhere. And what we really want to be doing is using resources like the art collection here in our teaching practice. So one thing we'd like to push for is a consolidated digital art and culture archive that everyone can really access, copyright permitting, and to use that rather than always having to go to other resources from elsewhere. Yeah, so that's sort of my kind of perspective on that question.
And can you maybe elaborate on the way that RMIT is currently using your collection, the RMIT collection, and also other artworks?
Yes, absolutely. So we're also pushing to integrate the RMIT Contemporary Art Collection into the curriculum. Because before we started doing this, we felt that students were going around campus but not actually realizing that these were contemporary Vietnamese artworks. Absolutely. They just thought, okay, there's something hanging on the wall, there's a sculpture in the middle of my library, but I don't know exactly what it is, or where it's from. So we really want to put it into the curriculum. So we're doing that. I'm doing that, for instance, in one of my courses, and getting students to carry out visual analyses on particular artworks, and to really engage them and raise awareness of what's around them in the campus and on the campus. So yeah, that's what we're trying to do. Not only myself, but colleagues as well.
Right. And Sun,
Yeah.
go ahead, somebody to add.
So in my perspective, I think for as a position as a teacher at the school, I think, yeah, as you can see, the history of the school is nearly 100 years, but the program is still very conservation. It's really, how can I say, it's just nearly like 50 or 60 years ago from when the school is start. It just figure out in how students draw, just the skill, just training the student for the skill. But for me, I think if the teacher, if the professor not really thinking for the student, can integrate something new and to encourage student thinking with a conceptual more, nothing happened. Yeah, and it's true that a lot of people told me that, oh, recently I feel university have a lot of exhibition and everything, news. Yeah, right, but just only me. So that's mean, oh, I think the system is still there. And if you really want to thinking is past them go forward, you need to jump in and do and just made it, and you cannot wait for the system or the policy changing. It's no way. If you really want to change, you need to change by yourself first. Yourself changing in your teaching. So actually, what you see in the exhibition from tradition to tradition in the Đình Nam Hương, actually it is a result of my lesson for the student. I changing the content of the course of the lesson from the very simple way to become like my subject will be interact with the seal painting into a space. It is my request for the student, and the student that means they start to thinking about the concept before working with material, and it start to changing a lot from the student, and I think it's have a good result because they are very skillful in some way, but nearly have no teachers passing them to thinking. Yeah, that's the point. Yeah, I think, and I think it's my experience that if you want to change something, you need to come inside and you change by yourself first. Yeah, and everything will be follow you. Just my perspective. Yeah.
And do you see that possibly happening more often at the ITGIL school in the future? I mean, that trend of, pushing for more
I think with
students.
kind of my projects, my students really they are very exciting, and they are really have no feeling that they are studying. They are really studying by really make a real project. And I try to make the border and blur the border between teaching, even studying, with a real project in life. And what you see right now in the exhibition in the school I made for the student with the exhibition value with the fine art photography, or very recently with the tradition, actually it is look like a very professional exhibition, but it's just a lesson. And I'm going to give the mark for them. Yeah, but they really have no feeling that they are still studying. So it's just it is the way when I try to changing in teaching. Is what I study when I study in Beijing in experimental art department, and I try to use that kind of what I got abroad to change the system in teaching concept for the student. Yep.
Yeah, and with Richard, I want to ask about your experience at Hoa Sen University so far, because
I've only been employed for about 2 weeks, so I
Right.
don't really have a lot to say at the moment. But I do have to say, on one hand, I agree with Sun, and I commend him for really taking an individual stance towards his teaching at an institution with such a long history. Actually, I didn't start at RMIT. I started at RMIT Vie in Thành phố Hồ Chí Minh. So we introduced the first video art production class in 2004. I was fired shortly after, but we did run it for a semester. So I guess my thinking is that the private sector in education has been much more agile and responsive to being able to develop curricula that it seems more contemporary. But even though that occurs, and I've been employed mostly with private institutions more recently, I have a real love for the traditional institutions, because you will never get lacquer painting, silk painting, ceramics, sculpture. You don't have these facilities at private institutions. And frankly, they're not really valued in private institutions as much. So the weight is from these institutions to carry on this tradition, where in fact many students really don't even see a real clear future of how I can be a ceramicist in a modern world. So there are two different unique situations that each have students that are looking towards the future and have educators with these challenges. So yeah, I don't know. I would love to see the traditional institutions revitalize their curricula. In fact, they need to if they're going to survive. And it will come down to the current generation of educators and their like peripheral institutions, such as the fine art associations and the communities, and to work together to see these things get better. And that goes to say that also applies to in Hue or Nam Nai College. They all need to really find their connection to deal with this contemporary situation. And I'm hoping that the private and the public institutions can somehow meet together, as they're doing today, you representing the public institution and RMIT representing the private.
Right, I think one of the key thematics in recent years has also been precisely the sort of combination between, let's say, traditions and also the sort of more contemporary practices. And yeah, and the sort of coming together of stakeholders from different sides, from the private sector and also from the governmental sector. And I want to ask how you see this trend, sorry, not really trend, but this sort of thematic developing further in the future. And how do you think technology might play a role here in the sort of preserving and promoting traditions and combining traditions with the more kind of contemporary practices? So essentially the role of technology in bringing these different factors together and making them really combining together.
I'm sorry for giving you always like the oil and water response that, on one hand this, on one hand that. I don't know, I'm a little skeptical, to be honest, about digitalizing many things. Even as I get information and enjoyment and enrichment off using digital technologies or accessing them through digital technologies, those things have an adverse impact on the environment. The more we use those, the more energy we take. And if I'm doing an artwork about conservation of the rainforest, but I'm broadcasting it around the world, really, I have to think about this holistically. And it's not always clear for me, and I feel torn about that. So, I don't know. I think it has potential to do a lot of good, but intrinsically, it's using a lot of resources that, as a planet, we don't seem to care about at the moment.
Yeah, I think also a factor to consider here is sustainability, and so that's also another layer to this.
For me, I think with the digital time, especially with the studio art, like my university, I think as an experience for half of the beginning of the year, this year, I don't think digital is something is good for teaching, and even for the student study, especially is practice. As the Rich mentioned about, you need to touch even the surface of the lacquer, or you need to feel the professor talking with you directly. So I'm not really believe about the digital can replace. It's just a tool to feel and to just to not the, I don't think it should be the mainstream. It just apply or support in like a conditioner things more than the main job of the teaching and study, especially with the with studio, because we are working with studio and we really need the real thing. The digital is just the surface and just the visual only. You will less a lot of feeling and even touch. Yeah, so it's just my opinion. Yeah.
Yeah, I also tend to agree that it shouldn't be a replacement for physical experience and physical spaces, especially in art, where the tangible, the actual experience of going to an exhibition is so important. But I think what's happening now is that we are finding ways to utilize these digital tools in better ways. So, for instance, with galleries and museums and art spaces here in Hanoi, they've really utilized Facebook. So whereas before the pandemic, they were mostly using Facebook just as an information tool for sharing information and updates, the lockdown and then the pandemic up until now has given them that time to really utilize Facebook, to think about their role on Facebook, not only just as information sharers, but also like community centers and sharing a lot of information around well-being during the pandemic, and sharing a lot more information and artworks and exhibition views, or just even views and photos of their spaces and what they're doing. So I think we've utilized digital technology in a better way, but I don't think it can ever be a replacement of physical experience and physical spaces.
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting tension to think about, because I also agree that it shouldn't take away from the physical sort of world experience, but yeah, sometimes it can. Sometimes it might be the only choice, especially with the current context of the world that we live in right now. And also, I'd like to ask about Emma's research, because also I'm aware that you've been exploring precisely this sort of tension, between the physical and the virtual, and the role that technology might play in the arts and culture in Vietnam. And can you share a bit more about your research?
Yeah, absolutely. And then that leads on from our previous question, because we've also found this tension between there being opportunities from digitization and digitizing art and culture, but also a lot of challenges. So yes, there's opportunities for showcasing Vietnamese art internationally. There's also a lot of challenges in terms of funding, or where's the money coming from to actually digitize artworks and make them publicly accessible. And then also the challenges of human resources. So do these art spaces have enough human resources, people with the necessary skills to utilize these ever developing and updating technologies? And then also the technology itself, like proper scanners and so on, in order to digitize their artworks properly. So there is this tension, like we were just saying, between the opportunities and the challenges. And that's what we've really found in the research so far. Yeah.
Thank you. And I think a related theme here is in terms of archiving and really sort of trying to create a sense of history of the arts and culture in Vietnam. And so I'd like to ask Sơn and Richard about your experience with archiving about your past projects, or just your experience with archiving in general, and like how do you archive basically, whether you use digital platforms for that. Or
Okay, from before 2000, I'm studying art in university, just drawing. But I'm very from the very beginning proposed I want to study photo, not only because I'm interested in photo, because of the I really need to archive by myself, because at that time it's quite difficult to find a good photographer to take the photo of the work by the. So you need to study by yourself. So I still remember I bought a Canon camera, the film camera, to study by myself how to use, and just the first proposal just to archive my painting. Yeah, and then slowly I love with photo, and then I adopted photo and study fine art photography in masterclass, and it's influenced to all of my career until now. But from more than 10 years ago, I'm really thinking about should make like a personal website. So from 2010, I'm start to bought from UK one WordPress. Yeah, so my name.com, and from UK, and should be international. And I always archive my old project, my writing, my press, video, and all my archive all my portfolio there. It's really helpful for me to for all kind of purpose. And recently, for 3 or 4 years recently, I'm really serious thinking about to make to document all my project, like National Assembly, or especially is this public art in Phong Hung. I always make a documentary film, and with English subtitle, and it is a very useful tool to work to spread out all the information about the and the content of the project to worldwide customer and all the friends. And I think it is nearly good for nearly need to one a professional way to you need a website and always update. And I have one assistant always work for me in update all the information, yeah, and filming all your project, yeah. Of course, photo is you need, but you really need the document film, the whole project, the whole process of the project, yeah. And show it in an international platform on YouTube or with English subtitle. It's just my experience here. And even next Friday, you will see the project when I carry out for my student, tradition to tradition. You will see we will have one film, document film in English subtitle in 20 minutes. Yeah, and the student will by themselves to make a PowerPoint to present all the process. So even my student always study the experience from the teacher. Is always archive and always try to take photo and record all the process of the whole project. Yeah, all the works need to archive. Yeah, it's just the experience I give for my student also. Yeah.
thank you. And Richard?
I guess I learned rather late my own relationship to archive. I started an organization, Dear Projects, in 2010. I was always obsessive about archiving things, but in that, my thinking was archiving as a means of preservation. But I realize now that An archive is like memory. It's changing and evolving. And in order to make new memories, sometimes you have to kind of forget things as well. And that came to a very poignant moment last year when I had to move studios into a smaller space. I had archives of almost 20 years of Southeast Asian art, and I offered them to other organizations if they wanted to take it, and none of them took it. So I put it in the dumpster, and it's gone. But I realized, just like every one of us has probably lost a hard drive or lost an important document, and it's really painful, but you survive. And your relationship to that changes. And so I think now I'm not so obsessive because I know, and as I age, I forget things. So I realize this just, an archive is a part of my normal flow of life. There's some things that I keep and some things that I don't. And I think what I would think is most important about an archive is, even though I may forget my relationship to that event, if it's there and accessible to some degree, someone else in the future may have access to that in a different context and create a different context by their relationship to it. So I think that's the most important thing. And it's the same thing about memory and storytelling, that if you stop telling stories, or your language, your native language, is extinct, then that's a finality. So I'm hoping that archives can encourage active engagement rather than being a mausoleum.
Yeah, I think it needs to be living and needs to be shared widely and publicly rather than kept.
Yeah, so I just add a little bit. For example, my public art project, I think I try to encourage people archive in their way. They interact with the works and take photo by themselves, and interact with the culture interact. I think like a cultural dialogue. Even it is another way of archive, and they will keep the memory for this. And I think in that way, quite same perspective with Rich about that's been less audience, and let the other person can continue to keep the memory about it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think also the archive should be living, and we should also engage community in archives, with feedback, so that there is some dialogue to make it living and evolving. Yeah.
And as educators or researchers, there's so much information that's available online behind paywalls. So that's a very, in my opinion, a very vicious way of archiving things. So there's a lot of knowledge that can be shared that isn't for profit. So I'm all for loosening that up.
I want to ask about when you were just mentioning the archive of Asian contemporary art that's currently sitting in your basement.
No, it's in the trash. It's in the landfill somewhere.
Right.
Because I had started out, I received a grant from the Asia Art Archive in Hong Kong to do a research project on the Mekong subregion. And this was in 2005, so it was quite early. And there wasn't as much information on Southeast Asia as there was in East Asia, for example. And that later led to some other projects. And I gathered all that information and I kept it. I had it open for others to access, but I realized I couldn't do it alone. And I didn't have the financial or the, at that point, even the personal resources to keep it alive. But then I realized that, like I said before, if you love something, set it free. Something like that. You just move on. But it's in my memory. I'm still able to talk about those things.
Yeah.
I think I can add a story about thinking about the archive in a project as a tradition to tradition. Actually, with this project, I try to make a new way of archive the Hàng Chống fox painting in a new transformation in a creative world of a person, because Hàng Chống painting, it's just a fox painting, have no painter, it's just artisan and like unknown. And now it will be transformed into artistic practice. And it is the way of archive. And because it's the reason why fox painting, Hàng Chống fox painting, even until right now, even is nearly dead. Because it have no root and no meaning in your life, your temporary life, your modern life. That means you cannot buy that and decoration in your home. So how to make it survive? So I think that's project tradition to tradition. Actually, I try to archive in a way of make a real project, and it only can survive when it have this outside and have the form of an artwork of an artist. Yeah,
And so to survive, it needs to evolve.
survive. Yeah.
Yeah, especially when there are people talking about it. And I think we might be running a bit over time.
Yeah.
But I'd like to open to the audience here and see if anyone has any question for any of the speakers.
Hi, I'm an art student, and as someone who lives in the 21st century, I know that Instagram and YouTube and things like WordPress and like online archives for personal artists has become very important and a good way to market yourself and advertise yourself. Do you think it's important that schools should be teaching us as art students and art teachers how to properly market ourselves online and in real life as well, so that we can create our own portfolios and make it accessible for everybody?
Yeah, I think that's definitely an important part of the artistic practice now. I've been researching artists for 7-8 years, and right at the start there was a lot of pushback from artists saying, well, why do I need to really develop this side of my practice when I don't want to be a social media enthusiast. I want to just do my art in my studio. But I think now the two go together, and so it is very, very important for us as educators to also be teaching on that side of practice, artistic practice.
Yeah, because I went to the gallery where some students have put as art, and I have talked to some of them, and I got their Instagram, I checked it out, and I see that a lot of it is not in the Instagram, it's not the art itself, but rather the activity while doing the art, which I think is a waste, because I would want to see more of their art after I've seen them in the gallery. So when I search up their name, I want to be able to see their artwork. I think it's, because that's what I do when I look at galleries abroad. So I think personally that schools should start focusing on this area, because I think it will expand much more, especially with how COVID has made us much more, like the online world, much more important to all of us.
Yeah, thank you. Even in my university right now, only me have website. Yeah, it is the fact of Vietnam, the situation. Even a lot of artists, how many artists in Vietnam have personal website? Not over 10. Yeah, it's a fact. So even you are you willing to pay at least few $100 per month to rent it? Yeah, it is actually a digital portfolio, and if you just consider it as important as your practice, so you need to invest in it. Yeah, just quite serious. If you really want to become a professional practice, yeah. But I think it's not really a popular concept in the community of the artists in Vietnam. Yeah.
I'd say that if there's a student demand for anything, I think educators should listen. Not that we'd be really great at doing a better job or showing you a better job of how to market yourself. Hopefully what we would be good at is showing you how to realize your own potential and to know who you are, like, deeply. And then the technical things, I doubt we'll be able to do it better. But from our experience, we could hopefully make you a better artist by allowing you to have better self-reflection. But there are some educators that are great at self-marketing, and they may not be in the art. They may be in communications or PR. You know, there will be people that will be able to help you that may not be directly involved in your practice.
Yeah, I agree with Richard. So I'm a reporter, so I work in photography magazines in Vietnam. So I also talk a lot about famous photographer in Vietnam, and he also say that like some they don't have Instagram, even in Facebook, to like publish their artwork because they say one of some person I interview, he said that because they don't want to like they are going to like publish it too much because in Vietnam copyright is not like it's not like as good as on the world, so they scared to like people to like steal his artwork or idea to do something else. So like it's a challenge. Yeah. So I agree with Emma, but I really appreciate how you do the exhibition online. It's really good guy. Some like it still have some problem like artwork of Mr. And because here before when I see on internet, I see it's just normal photo, but when I come here, the photo I spend a lot of time to just look. It's really amazing. So I know it's difficult, but I really appreciate like the ways you try to bring it online to approach many people when a pandemic coming. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. And I think both your questions are sort of connected because a lot of artists are scared of putting their actual artworks up on Instagram, for instance, because they fear that they're going to just be copied and shared and reposted. And that's why they're putting more of the process rather than the final artwork. So there is an issue around that with copyright. Not only here in Vietnam, but globally.
I have another question. Well, it's not really a question, but I studied art here, and most of the things that I have access to teach me on how to do things like watercolor and pencil drawings, and I can learn that by myself, and of course learning at school is also very important. But I think more classical things like oil painting and lacquer painting does not have a lot of we don't get taught a lot in school. And I think it's a waste because I'm really curious about how people do these things, but I don't get the chance to learn them. And I think it's a big pity that people in middle school or high school don't get to learn a lot of these. In textbooks, in Vietnamese textbooks on art, they only talk about pencil drawings mainly. So, and if we can't do it practically, I would like to know the process of doing it at least. So, just a thought.
Thank you. I wonder if there's any other question.
Yes, I just want to ask, how do you see Vietnamese contemporary art in the coming year, in 2021? Because in that year, we don't know whether the pandemic will be over or become more severe. So will the art be developed greater, or will be a little hold back in a close future?
For me, I think even I'm involved in a lot of public art and contemporary art project in town, but I don't think it will become a popular phenomenon next year. Next year is too soon. Yeah, because the situation about it still not really happen in the education, and when it start in the education first, so and then you will have the art lover in contemporary art, and then you have the collector, and then you have the contemporary art museum, right? So I think it's nearly needed process, and at least I think at must shortest time it should be around in 10 years around in Vietnamese situation. I think so. Cannot next year.
I mean, for me, I'm very interested to see how, with digital platforms, it's going to allow Vietnamese art to sort of travel further, and those international connections and collaborations to develop. So I'm really interested to see how that develops next year. But again, it might not be next year, it might be 3 or 5 years. Yeah.
And one more thing I mentioned about the contemporary concept. Even right now in the Vietnamese scene, it is one of the words. It is a lot of people would like to use it, and they just use the outside of the word. Even a lot of people really don't understand about what is really contemporary. Nowadays, all the exhibitions that we call, it is an exhibition of the contemporary oil painting, contemporary artist or something. But I think I'm wondering that even a lot of people they mention about the contemporary. It's just about the time, not really about the concept of contemporary art. Yeah. So I don't think. I mean, the popular understanding and knowledge about the contemporary art it's good enough and enough to be made so something change very soon. Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
For me, I don't know. I would agree that maybe a 1-year period with a pandemic or not might not make a huge difference, particularly in Vietnam as we've dealt with the pandemic rather effectively. So we haven't had any real catastrophe as other nations have experienced. But if we think about, 1 year or 25 years, 25 years is really, I would put that when contemporary art started to evolve in Vietnam. 1995, when the U.S. lifted its trade embargo, the first generation of artists to experience international exhibitions came from Hanoi. If you look at Jung Tan, who's also in the collection, Minh Thanh, Minh Van Nguyen. So all these first generation of Hanoi artists really started the move of contemporary art traveling globally. And so that's not a long time ago. And look how far Vietnam has come in 25 years, or 1 year. So I don't know. But if we look at 25 years, we ought to be optimistic.
And can I give a comparison with China? I studied 4 years in China, and I studied in the really short Central Academy of Fine Art in Beijing, and I studied in experimental art institute. It's really like a root of the education for contemporary art in China. It is the institute of Subing, of Ai Weiwei, a lot of very famous Liu Xiaodong, with totally nearly the top of contemporary art in China right now. And what has happened? They really need to change from 1990, and their modernization, all this, the lesson, all the cost of this. That means the contemporary art should be taught in the school, even from 1990. And now, after 20 years, they have the results. So you can imagine, it still not happen in education in Vietnam. Only RMIT is just a collection. It's not teaching. It's not education about contemporary art. Yeah. So I don't think it will be happen soon. If it is in China, it is a very good example of how contemporary art is going on with a very similar situation about artists, about cultures, politics. Everything is very similar. And And the purpose when I go to study in China, I really want to know, so what really happened with the art education, especially with the contemporary art education in the root, in the center of the society. Yeah. So I'm really have a personal experience about it. Yeah. I personal in 4 years in Beijing and research and understanding and study directly from them. Yeah.
I think a lot of the momentum is coming from non-institutional spaces in Vietnam, art spaces both in Hanoi, Saigon, and elsewhere, developing informal programs which invite students from institutions that carry that back in, and then institutions bring educators on. So that they start to connect this way. And that's still ongoing now. So you could check Facebook or other things and find out what sort of events are happening in your locality. And if you attend them, we'll start to see changes for 2021, for sure.
Yeah, I think changes are happening all the time, actually. So it's, yeah. I think even though we ran over for half an hour, I still wish we had a lot more time to talk. Because also, we covered a lot of ground already, actually, and touch on quite a lot of different aspects in terms of Vietnamese contemporary art and cultures in 2020. And I think some good takeaways that we can, keep thinking about later would be this sort of tension between, physical and digital experiences, and also regarding the dynamics between traditions and contemporary practice, especially in the context that we live in right now, and with everything that's happening both in Vietnam and across the world, and yeah, I think it's a very complex picture, but it's quite interesting that we're all kind of doing something in our own ways, and I think yeah, there's a lot to be hopeful about. As a matter of fact, even though everything is still quite uncertain and unpredictable. So thank you again for sharing about your experiences and about all the great work that you've been doing in the scene here. Thank you, Rachel, Tae Son, and Emma. And also I'd like to thank Michelle, who's a co-curator of this exhibition and organizer of this whole contemporary art strand for this festival. And I'd like to say thanks to everyone for being here today and for joining us and asking questions.
Thank you.
Thank you. The exhibition is still up for another day. It ends tomorrow. So do tell your friends about the exhibition, and maybe check out the virtual exhibition as well. It's great. Thanks.